Okay, so we're sat here in Hong Kong on the Gold Coast, and sat next to Jon Corbet. Now, for those, many people know you, Jon, but for those that don't, can you kind of explain who you are?
Who I am? Well, my name is Jon Corbet. I am the chief editor for LWN.net, which is an online website dedicated to technical news about the Linux operating system and things associated with it.
Okay, thanks. Yes, LWN, Linux Weekly News, we know it well. And I'm Dave Rusling, I'm the CTO of Linaro, so I am the arm wavy technical dude. And I've wanted for a long time to get you to one of these connects. And finally, after begging, you came along to this one, you gave us a keynote on Monday. How's the show for you?
Well, I guess I'm sorry I waited so long to come, but I guess you got to make people beg a little bit, or you seem too easy. But I've really enjoyed being in the crowd of people that you have here, and a lot of folks really very oriented towards the solution of a lot of near-term and pressing problems, making things work better for all of us, and making Linux work better in a lot of settings, and I've been enjoying it quite a bit.
Okay, excellent. No, that's good. In terms of sessions, which sort of sessions have you been to?
I've tended towards the more technical kernel-oriented sessions, so yeah. I went to the session on the big.LITTLE MP scheduler work, for example, and got an update on where things stand with that set of patches, which I personally find to be very interesting, because it's a problem in a sense nobody has ever really solved, of how do you take a system with heterogeneous CPU cores and actually make it work properly.
Yeah, it's more about it's big.LITTLE is a technology, but the problem is to do with the scheduler being flexible enough and having enough information to do the right thing across all sorts of cores. I mean, the heterogeneous is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's ever really had to solve that problem before.
No. One of the things that I'm interested in your opinion on this, one of the things I keep saying is that Linux kernel is jolly nice. It's grown a bit since the early days. It's got 3 different ways of doing anything. But in general, it's kind of not as flexible as it could be for the ARM architecture. The ARM architecture is, because the way the licensing models work, it's incredibly diverse. One way to solve that is only have one ARM platform. The other way is to engineer the kernel to kind of be able to be flexible, and I think that's happening in a lot of areas, but power management is an example of that. Is that
right? Yeah, the kernel kind of grew up in the x86 world, where you have much more of a standard platform and all the systems look the same, whereas ARM is not like that. ARM is a much more diverse and interesting world in that regard, and so it changes the kernel's worldview a bit to have to face that kind of ecosystem of hardware and to manage it in the ways that it expects to be managed, which is part of why I've been glad to see the ARM developers working their way towards the core kernel and making the kernel able to actually better understand that.
Yeah, I sort of think we've sort of climbed out of a gravity well. We were all down in Arch ARM platform, right? And then we were in Arch ARM, and now we're kind of everywhere. Is that scary or good?
Well, it's scary. One can see it as a sort of, the children escaping from the schoolyard in a sense. But that's not true. It's more the children growing up and taking their place in what is a very large and diverse community of several thousand developers. And so just becoming more of the same and doing their part to drive the direction of the whole thing.
So one of the things I'm interested in is, as ARM grows up, and I think that's quite a good way of looking at things, is more it's not just ARM really, it's embedded, it's mobile, it's power aware maintainers existing. I mean, there are maintainers for all the different subsystems now, but I've felt in the past that ARM types weren't doing enough maintainership. Is that a reasonable criticism?
I think that's a reasonable criticism. We went from a situation where people developing on ARM often weren't participating in the kernel development community at all. They were simply adding their stuff on and shipping it to the side, to where they were then kind of adding it into the pile but not really taking ownership of the problem of keeping the kernel going over the long term. And so that has changed considerably. And so we have a lot of sort of mid-level maintainers at this point coming out of the ARM community and sort of slowly working their way up to the top tier of maintainers who deal directly with Linus and who help to drive the direction of the kernel as a whole. That is definitely happening, and I think that's a very good thing.
No, I think that for me comes under the social engineering aspect of this, and I think it's a growing sign of maturity by the various companies that in order, open source is kind of fear and greed, right? It's here's this thing I can use to make products, and I can make loads of money, which is the greed part, and then fear, but it's open source and I can't control it. So they have to balance this thing, and letting their kernel guys be full maintainers is a sign of maturity.
It's a sign of maturity, and it's a sign of there's a problem that kernel developer Thomas Gleichner once called the platform problem, that comes from, especially with people who are used to working with proprietary software systems, where you've got this immutable software platform that you're trying to develop for, and then you've got your little piece that you can add on to it, but all the rest of it is just, it's a given. You can't do anything to change it. And people tend to bring that mentality into the kernel community as well. And so we saw that in the ARM tree, where here's my sandbox, as one developer said the other day.
Yes.
So this is the piece that I have influence over, and the rest is the platform.
I can't touch that.
And so it's a continual process at all levels of the stack, much above the kernel too.
Yeah, but the truth is you can touch the core bit, and it may need the infrastructure re-engineering to take account of these things. I mean, the work in HMP really, rather than just thinking about big.LITTLE, is all about re-engineering, pulling methods out of subsystems and making them available for all, then tuning them and then using them in different ways. There's a lot of infrastructure changes in that.
A lot of structures at all levels, but the point being there is no immutable platform, right?
No,
you can
it's all
make
open to be changed. Yeah.
You can make the changes where they need to be made rather than working around problems.
Do you write any kernel code these days, or is it more writing about kernel code?
It's definitely a lot more writing about kernel code. I still do some consulting here and there, but for various reasons I haven't been able to do much of that for the last year or so. So, but I do hope to get back into that.
Yeah, I do too, and I mostly look at code that people, the kernel guys are writing, and to understand what they're doing, so that I can kind of help in some way, shape, or form. So,
one thing that may drive me into that is I'm really hoping with Greg to redo the device driver book, which is, since it covers 2.6.10, is just a little bit behind the times.
A little bit out of date. Well, you should worry. I wrote about the kernel back in the 2.0 days, and so the book I wrote is incredibly out of date. So there you go.
Every time I've done an iteration on the book, I'll go into the code. Okay, I got to figure out how this works so that I can tell people how to do it. And you find things and say, wait a minute, I can't document that. That sucks, right? So let's just fix it, so that I can write a document that I'm a bit less ashamed of. And so that's how I often get back into developing things.
How did you end up writing about how code works? How did you end up being a writer?
Not intentionally. Not intentionally. My background is electrical engineering and then computer science. And that's what I did for much of my life until I started moving into management, and I decided I didn't like that and bailed out of that.
Well, to manage means to cope, so that's fine.
Right, okay. Okay, good enough. But I got into doing what I'm doing now as a function of starting a little newsletter just to document what we were seeing following what the development community was doing, and trying to show the world how smart we were so that people would come to us to get their problem solved.
Right, I certainly value the articles that you write. I mean, if I Google for an area and there's an LWN article, not just yours, Jake's, and other people as well, but that I think are great, and certainly some of the ones I read are really good. And there's a need for it, because quite often how things work in the kernel involves several subsystems, and you can start reading the code, and then suddenly you're way deep in too much detail, and it's kind of hard to come up. So getting a bit of a roadmap from someone, a bit of a way in, is really, really good.
Well, that's what we try to do. So.
Excellent. In terms of sessions over the next couple of days, is it more kernel and just...
Yeah, more more kernel stuff, and honestly, I have to look. I kind of look one day ahead in the schedule, and I haven't looked that far ahead yet.
No, that's fine.
I'll certainly see
short look ahead buffer's fine. That's cool.
Yeah, something like that. Just-in-time planning.
Okay. Have you? I know this is a different. I mean, there's a lot of the same people you already know. It's the same faces, different location. And but there's a lot of folks who you don't know particularly well, and it's a bit of a different community, and it's different kind of mandate and direction. Have you got any thoughts about? Have you formed any opinion on us? You can say anything you like, obviously.
Any opinions I may have formed are still definitely
being
the formative.
Okay, right. That's
formative
cool.
Stage. What I see.
Well, you didn't
mainly,
run away, so that's.
I
good.
haven't run away. No, I see a lot of very focused people working on solving problems.
Good.
And
good. Okay. Well,
that's getting work done.
As I said at the start, I'm really glad you've come, and happy to see you join in. I hope you have a good rest of the week, and maybe come to another one.
Well, I was going to say thank you very much for inviting me. I'm glad I made it.
That's great.
If I haven't abused my welcome too badly, I would be delighted to be invited back sometime.
Okay. Thanks very much, John.
All right.
Cheers.
Well, thank you.